Welcome to Street Talk Plus. We are continuing our webinar series looking at social entrepreneurship and the third sector, and how we can use that entrepreneurial mindset in the third sector to address some of the gaps that we have seen during the pandemic. I'd like to introduce to you again our guest, Mr. Safaraz Ali. Safaraz, as I said, is originally from the financial sector and is a social entrepreneur, the founder and the head of the Pathway Group. And he's CEO, where, Pathway Group, it's a leading skills provider with a vision of changing lives through skills and work. He, as an entrepreneur, he works on various initiatives. He's a published author and a community activist. He does have an awfully long biography, but I'm going to cut it short here. And welcome, Safaraz. How are you today?
Thank you so much, Dr. Riaz. Always good to be here. I do a few things, but this is an area that's fairly new to me. But obviously, I'm very interested in anything to do with people and individuals and social mobility. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about this particular topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Safaraz. In our previous session, what we did was we laid down some of the groundwork of what a social entrepreneur was, what the third sector was, and we sort of touched upon some of the areas where we as a third sector could start filling in the gaps that have been left by the state. And, we've recognized that there are inequalities which arise from the social and economic structures, and they compound the very disadvantage and direct discrimination, based on race, sex, gender, disability, and sexual orientation, as well as class. And it holds people back from fulfilling their full potential. And I think it's also important, and you touch upon this, that it's important to recognize that the pandemic has shifted the expectations and changed the perceptions of what and how we do differently. It's very much that, originally when we worked in big organizations, if we had caring responsibilities, we were told we couldn't work from home. Now it's changed very, very quickly, that we have the VPN systems, etc., the external hard drives, that kind of digital infrastructure now accommodates home working on a huge scale. But really, what I think we need to touch on is that, even though we've seen that massive state intervention and support, which was inconceivable over a year ago, for example, the furlough scheme, that the action has not been as swift to provide for those most in poverty through losing their jobs, etc. And we're going to be touching on food poverty for this session, and it's very, very, it's very prominent on the media right now. And I would really like to know what your thoughts are on how we can address some of the issues that we are seeing with school children not, going hungry. And, this week we saw on Twitter and social media and in our normal media, the kind of packages that are being provided for children. Some are fair and some are incredibly poor. So let's start on that, though. I think it's really interesting. Let's start at this point and then perhaps move backwards a little bit.
I think Dr. Riaz, you've said quite a few things there, and you've covered the journey, but and you finished off with this the recent sort of headline news and the recent campaign. And most of us are probably aware of the name Marcus Rashford now, even if we haven't, even if we're not following sports. And myself, I came across that name first time, embarrassingly, last year, and it was to do with obviously child poverty, particularly with regard to schools, and some of the stats. So basically, you've got a leading voice, leading a campaign, a cause, say, and just as the chef Jamie many years ago raised the quality of food in schools. This is another a cause and a campaign, and rightfully so. Food poverty definitely in the UK has increased, and if you go to research and findings, and we start off with organisations like the Trussell Trust, which is well known in the particular sector, set up in 1997 to deal with, particularly with regard to food poverty and setting up food banks and so forth. They talk about the fact that it's increasing, and the impact on families is there, particularly with basic nutritional needs. This year, most of us have been talking about our vitamin deficiency. We've been talking about our immune system, and again, that's another topic that is on most people's sort of. It's a tip of our tongue. We're all talking about it, and so people are spending more on food, but they say they're eating less in terms of nutrition and nutritional options. So that's something as well. So but if you go back to what is food poverty, is there one definition? Do we understand what that is? I try to look at that in terms of what is it. What's the government definition on it? What are organisations saying it? And it wasn't very clear in terms of what is a single definition of food poverty. But most of it, I think, relates to household income and how much percentage of household income people are spending with regard to on food. And I think the stat came along the lines of the people who are more well off, the richer, are spending 3 to 4% in terms of income on their food. So I think something along the lines of, if you're in the top 10%, you're spending around 4% of your income on food. There are obviously people who spend a lot less than that, but I'm just talking about the top 10%. But if you're in the lower quartile, you're spending 25% of your income on food. So imagine that 25% of all your income is just going on food. And again, the quality of food, the nutritional value is a lot lower as well. So this is really what we're talking about. But we're also talking about food banks, just not having enough money to spend on basics, and also how that links in with government support and so forth. So it is a massive topic. Yes, it is in the news, but it's been of concern for many years. And I think prior to this year, this year and last year, where it's predominantly been about school children, I think the topic prior to that was about, why are working class people who are working, having to have the need of food banks. That was the topic, I think, the year before. That's still the topic now. The story hasn't gone away, but the headlines are currently about school children.
I think you're right. It's still equally relevant in today's conversation. But when you look at it from that political context, and we look at it from, for me, I didn't see or hear about the topic of food banks in the general media until after 2012, where some of the austerity measures by the Conservative government had come into play, and it had led into a rise in repossessions of housing and families struggling to find accommodation, and along with that, because of the lack of income or a lower income, the rise of food poverty. And I think there was a film by Ken Loach, that Daniel Blake, which brought home to me the total dehumanization of people who are supposed to be protected by the state. And when you hear about politicians making statements on they get more than enough benefits for the people that they have dehumanized through the media, through their policies, it's very much they think £30 or £40 can support a family through a week or an individual's. That's how much that they would spend on their breakfast in one of the cafes in the House of Commons. And that is subsidized. So they have one set of rules for themselves and another completely different set of rules in the way they look at people that are the most marginalized in our society and need our help the most. So Marcus Rashford coming in, and now with his new campaign with Jamie Oliver and other celebrities to ask for long-term policy change for free school meals. Do you think that is a step forward? And what more could be done? And how do we, as a third sector, help make that move happen?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there, Dr. Riaz. I mean, the first thing is, food banks themselves, they've been going for many, many years. I mentioned Trussell Trust back in 1997. You've got the Salvation Army, but what you now have is many community organisations that are involved. The local mosque down the road, the church halls, the temples, the gurdwaras. All of those are all involved in this initiative. And what they're finding is that in some cases, in fact, I would say in most cases, it's the people who are coming into these food banks. It's because of a crisis. It's a temporary measure. They've had something that's unexpected. Whether it's redundancy, reduced hours. You've got a 0-hour economy. You've got people, jobless, redundancies. You've got other things that come in. The unexpected things. Could be a boiler issue. Could be some costs that they've incurred. And all of these things that they experience, it could be benefit delays as well, delays in their claim. Could be many things like that, which then result the individual to rely on a community food bank, and I think that's obviously a shame. There's no doubt about that. But I think we've got to look at the fact that the food banks are there in times of crisis, and it's not just about homeless. So, you think about homeless people queuing up for food banks. Yes, there is, but that's, I think, from memory, that was 5% or less of food bank clients are homeless people. Majority are, are citizens of this country that are in the system, either working or unemployed and having to rely on this. So it's not necessarily people who are in the homeless category. It is people who are working, and I think that's the first thing that I wanted to differentiate the fact that we're talking about food banks, and community food banks. They've been going for many years, and there's many researches on that. In terms of the other point, in terms of the school issue, I think the school issue, the free school meals, they've been there for many years. We can remember our entitlement to milk and those sort of benefits that were there, and obviously that has changed. But it is a safety net.
When you mentioned the free milk, that just brings me back to the 1970s and calling Margaret Thatcher the milk snatcher. So that was when I was in primary school. So that's how far back we go.
Yeah, it goes back many years, and I sometimes tell my children the fact that we used to be given a bottle of milk at the time, but free school meals are a safety net, and they are there to protect people who are, who are in need of some support, and it's an additional benefit for people who are in need of. They're on benefits, so there's an entitlement there, and it is an entitlement that the schools have a responsibility for, and the previous campaign was about the quality of that food and changing people's habits. This is about basic necessities and in terms of what's been given and their entitlement. So it's not necessarily about changing habits of individuals, eating healthier. It's about basic nutrition, basic nourishment, and that entitlement. And the last year or so has has had unintended consequences in terms of the cost to parents of looking after children, full time effectively. We talk about the crisis and things that are not in people's control, and people who found something that's unexpected. So what's actually happening is that because there's an unexpected cost now that individuals have had to bear and have responsibility for, that has then a double whammy type effect as well. So the two are interlinked. There's no doubt, but I think, in terms of the third sector and social enterprise and social organizations or community organizations, they're heavily involved in the food bank sector. I mentioned Trussell Trust, leading provider, but it's all the independent providers, community organizations, or local mosques, and there's a lot of initiatives there, and it's about people having that sense that they can go to food banks, and there shouldn't be a stigma, and just to make it easier for people to utilize that. It's not a solution, but what we've got to use it. What we've got to try and do is to get people to utilize the option of that if in need, as opposed to the stiff upper lip and not and facing exceptional and unnecessary pressure. I think there needs to be a campaign in terms of it's not a stigma. I know people have got their own pride and so forth, but it shouldn't be a stigma, and it shouldn't be. And you're not an underclass or a second class or a third class citizen if you need to utilize one of those community food bank services.
Absolutely, that is what the welfare state is for. It's to make sure that we capture and support and provide the resources, because everyone has that basic right to some sort of income, housing, warmth, and food. But I think what really interested me when we started this conversation was the government didn't do this of its own free will. It was basically shamed, not only by Marcus Rashford and other campaigners, but also by a group in the United Nations called UNESCO, which for the first time ever provided a grant to the government to ensure that it had, it focused on feeding and making sure that food was available to the most marginalised amongst us. So following on from that argument, that statement, well, can the third sector, can they meet that gap in provision, and should it be actually expected to? Because, when we talk about community organisations, this is on many occasions like religious institutions like churches, gurdwaras and mosques who go out and ask for contributions from the public to stock their food banks and do all the cooking and then go out into the community. Is that sustainable? And really, should that not be the job of the state? Safaraz, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the state is there to support and protect people. That's the role of one of the key roles of the state. There's no doubt. Fully agree with you. The fact that absolutely embarrassing for. Whether it's the fifth richest economy or fifth biggest economy or the sixth biggest economy, and we keep changing from fourth, fifth, and sixth in the last sort of decade or 2 decades. So we're either the fourth or fifth or sixth, depending on where we are. But we are still one of the richest countries on the planet, and for us to receive the support of the United Nations humanitarian support agency UNICEF. Obviously, it puts it into context, and it's just it's very difficult to understand in terms of where that is and what's actually happened. I think in terms of the role of community organisations and social organisations are there and have been there for many years, whether it's on a philanthropy type basis, going back, 3, 4, 500 years in terms of locally to us in Birmingham, the Cadbury's organisation, the Bourneville organisation, and many other organisations that have been there from a philanthropic perspective. Those initiatives are there, and it's not about discouraging those, and it's not about necessarily saying more of those, but the role of the state is the role of the state, and there are gaps, and there are gaps there, and this is where the third sector and other organisations have stepped in, and in many different ways. It's not just about food banks, but it's also about food gardens, allotment centres. It's also about training and support in terms of nutrition. It's about supporting individuals in terms of understanding more about their food, raising awareness in terms of nutrition value. It's also encouraging people to cook for themselves. And these initiatives are there. It's not just one size fits all, and organizations are doing different things, encouraging bakery type projects, and encouraging ways to save as well, to be more aware in terms of how to get more for their money. Part of it is linked to education for budgeting. So there's many different layers. You got the banks coming in as well in terms of money management. Understand, for people to understand where the money is going, what they're spending money on, understanding, their eating habits. So there's all of these things that are there. So very similar to, the sort of campaigns that have been going on previously with regard to health, and getting people to understand about their health needs. I think there's definitely a rise in food educational and money educational programs, and there's many organizations, not just social organizations, but blue chip organizations as part of their corporate social responsibility, and different levels of projects, and they're just bringing people together. So it's not all about the bread line and the bottom end support, but it's also about getting more for less. It's also about understanding, raising awareness, and allowing people to choose healthier food, better food, and having that sort of environment where they're constantly sort of growing and learning and being more aware and more conscious.
Yeah, I like what you just shared there. There is that huge element of education. It's a shame that isn't started right from early years, primary school, secondary school onwards. So when the opportunity for young people to leave schools, that it's not a whole brand new world that opens up to them. They need to be able to know and have that understanding of how the world works. So I think that's something that we can perhaps discuss at a later.
I mean, even things like perishable food and ourselves, when we go into supermarkets and understanding what the dates mean, best before and eat before, and all various different definitions and so forth. And we've had the sugar tax recently as well, and all these sort of E numbers and just understanding of food as a whole. So I think education and raising awareness for us to discuss these things, absolutely vital. I think for supermarkets and for us to understand their supply chain, to encourage the amount of waste that happens. I mean, if you look at some of the programs, the amount of food that we throw away, the amount of waste that happens, these are things that we need to be conscious of as a society, and we need to be more aware in terms of the impact that we individually have, what we can do with regard to that, and just if we can give back in any way, shape or form, I think we should. But it's also things that we can do in terms of our own habits. This is also a form of giving back. It's also a form of looking after the human race as a whole, and just being more conscious in terms of our impact as individuals that we can make.
No, thank you. Hopefully this will be our last question, because I tend to want to unpack as I go along. But, is there a national register where people can access what food banks are available? I mean, what are the routes available for people if they need that extra support? How do they get it? I mean, are there, like I said, are there national registers or contact details, regional or local?
I think all the GPs, from my sort of limited knowledge, have got information in terms of referral, where they can refer people to, the community advice centres, your community groups. Most people are aware, and it's fairly easy to find out where things are. If you go to your local authority, they normally have information in terms of that. So it's not necessarily a national register from my understanding, but the largest organisation that's out there is the Trussell Trust. So if you just go to the Trussell Trust, find a food bank section on their website, I think that's a good go-to generally for that. So the information is there. It's a matter of really trying to get that from the best source that you can.
Now, I was going to just add to that I was reading around this topic this morning, and I was delighted to see that Marks and Spencer's have set up this initiative that for every £15 meal voucher that is bought to them, they will add an extra £5 worth of produce to that meal voucher. And that to me it's demonstrating social and corporate responsibility. Is this something that we as a community can lobby, petition our government or put up as a good practice model of a way forward?
I think generally, we're more conscious about buying fresh, buying local. That's also something that I would encourage. It's at the end of the day, the organisations will do whatever the consumers demand and ask, and if the consumer, if we're asking the questions, if we're you talked about the government, we're forced into that pressure. Also, there's pressure from peers, there's pressure from community, there's pressure from the public. Social media is very powerful. You've got you've got campaigns and causes going on, and from individuals. It's just raising awareness, raising a voice. Our voice has more of an echo now. We can we can tweet directly to the sort of supermarkets and all the main players that are out there, and we can raise those issues. So it's not just about writing letters to customer services at the supermarkets, but there's many things that we can do, and we can encourage them to reduce their carbon footprint in terms of where they source from as well. We can ourselves start supporting the local organisations as well, the local suppliers. There's many things that we can do, and I think we need to just be aware and conscious of the fact that we individually can make a difference and can make an impact, and it's not just about the next person or somebody else to do that. We ourselves can make a difference, and it's understanding our own power and utilising that in the best way.
Thank you, Safaraz. Again, a very interesting session. I look forward to speaking to you again. We have various topic areas that we'll be covering in future sessions, and we look forward to you joining us then, Safaraz. Any last words?
That's fine. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity once more. It's this conversation that we've had about food. I think we're all aware of it, and it's one that is definitely mixed emotion. It takes a footballer to get the government to do something. I think it's hard for me to understand that, And it shouldn't come to that, but we need to do whatever we need to do to get the results. And it's about the impact, and it's about the results, and we utilize our own voice, and we can all do something, and we should.
Absolutely. Thank you.